I would like to say that first off, it's important to acknowledge that it is Martin Luther King Day, and nothing should detract from his radical vision, Tucker. And he was assassinated by the US government. You've talked about JFK's assassination recently. Yep. This was in the same period. And he was assassinated right when he was escalating from talking about racial bigotry to class and in the war in Vietnam.
I noticed.
What? Okay, there are rare examples of someone on the broad left going on Tucker's show and actually making the most of it for the best possible reasons. This is an example of that. So that's Seneca Scott, who is the cousin of Coretta Scott King, telling Tucker Carlson that Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated by the US government specifically because of his emphasis on class and, more importantly, his socialist values. And you know what's insane about this video? It appears that Tucker Carlson, to some extent, agrees with him. Now, we'll show you that clip in a minute. I gotta give you more context here. So Seneca Scott is a politician and community organizer. He served in the Oklahoma House of Representatives for 8 years between 2008 and 2016. Now, he was at one point fined for using campaign finances for personal use. Last year, he tried and failed to run for mayor of Oakland. Just wanted to give you some background on him. But Tucker Carlson brought Seneca on his show last night specifically to discuss the horrible new MLK, look, I think it doesn't look so great, but the new MLK statue that was just unveiled in Boston. Want to show you some images of it. So I look, Emma, am I being too harsh in noting that this is not a great statue to honor and represent MLK?
I don't think that you are being too harsh. I do not have an artistic eye, so I can't speak to it. But from the outside, it's not great. My eyebrows are raised, though, on that. Well, I mean, oh boy,
right?
There, I mean, there you go. Right in the chyron, phallic. We see it. But I need to talk about what the guest just said on that program.
Yeah, I mean, jump in.
Like that, first of all, we need a large-scale investigation into the assassinations of Martin Luther King.
Yes.
Malcolm X, we essentially know what happened, that at least the authorities let it happen, allegedly. JFK, there's a lot of questions about the ties that the assassin had to the FBI, to the CIA, past work that he had done. Like, there's a reason that these major leaders who were either civil rights icons or presidents like JFK, who essentially weren't going to go along with the most militant actions that the national security establishment wanted in regards to combating communism,
right,
as they say, in Cuba and elsewhere. There's a reason that they all were assassinated at a very similar time. And look, I don't know the case. I don't know the facts, but the reality is that, at least, especially with the JFK assassination, there are many, many questions that need to be answered. And with Martin Luther King, there's a great podcast called the MLK Files, which I'd recommend to people, which dives into this question as well. What's annoying is that this is being said on Tucker Carlson because he wants to co-opt leftist critique of the national security establishment in favor of an alternative narrative, one that is not based in reality, that essentially says that the national security establishment is biased against conservatives, and
that's hilarious.
And that's why he has that person on there, right? It's like it's to feed a deep state conspiracy theory, as opposed to one that's based in reality, which is that the FBI and the CIA are in lockstep with the kind of thinking that Tucker Carlson espouses on his program, and are foundationally built on targeting leftists, civil rights leaders, et cetera.
100%, 100%. I mean, listen, take a look at the US government orchestrated coups in history. were there coups of right-wing leaders, or were there coups of democratically elected leftist leaders? I mean, we know what the answer is. And so when we look at Guatemala, when we look at Iran, I mean, Iran, I wouldn't say leftist, but you get the picture. I mean, any time that there is a newly elected, democratically elected leader that has a platform focusing on, let's say, nationalizing resources, redistributing wealth, maybe even shutting out some US-based business interests. Oh, wow, weird that there was a coup in that country to overthrow that democratically elected leader. So you'll see those instances in history, and Tucker Carlson pretending as though the deep state is against the right wing is hilarious, to say the least. Now, let's get back to the conversation that Seneca Scott had with Tucker Carlson, because what I liked about it is that Seneca Scott specifically mentioned the class angle, the socialism angle. It's so important for Americans to understand that Martin Luther King was a socialist. That's not something that you're gonna learn about in your history classes, but it is the truth. And I'll have some excerpts from some of his speeches to prove it. But before we get to that, let's hear the rest of that conversation.
Well, you make a good point that no one ever says out loud, but he had shifted to populist economics. I have no idea who killed Martin Luther King, but it's very obvious it was not James Earl Ray acting alone. He had 2 foreign passports. He was escaped from prison. The whole thing is ridiculous. Why is there no interest in that question?
Why is there no interest in that question, Emma? I mean, Tucker Carlson, I guess in his mind, is an economic populist of sorts, although we know that
give me a
further.
break.
I know, right?
Well, I mean, honestly, like it really is unfortunate that he's so good at his job, Tucker Carlson. He's an evil man, and he knows what he's doing. He knows that he is co-opting the history of leftism in this country and copy and pasting populism into it, because he knows that's more associated right now with Donald Trump and like Jair Bolsonaro and the wing of that part and the wing of the conservative movement. The reality is that the United States government and the intelligence community, the FBI, the CIA, was aggressive, militant in stamping out communism and anybody who might be associated with that. And at the top of their list were civil rights leaders like MLK, like Malcolm X, who they allegedly allowed for that assassination to happen, like Fred Hampton, who they assassinated, like anybody who might be associated with it. Blacklist created in Congress. It is not an anti-populist structure, the FBI and the CIA. They're anti-leftist, foundationally to this day. Don't forget it. Don't get it twisted, right? This is not about being anti-Trump. They're anti-Trump now because Trump has broken the law many, many, many times and has undermined a lot of just like foundational democratic laws and norms. But outside of that instance, which is a rarity, which is an outlier, what these national security establishment structures are there to do is to tamp down subversive leftists, socialists who might be communists, who might challenge corporate power. That is foundational to understanding the history of the United States. And what Tucker Carlson is doing on his program right now is actually rewriting history and having someone on there who's speaking credibly about that history and saying a lot of accurate things. And then Tucker's putting his very subtle spin on it in order to appeal to his right-wing audience and change history for them.
I want to read a few excerpts from Martin Luther King to just kind of focus on his socialist and his socialist political views and his focus on class. So I just want to note that he didn't just advocate for organized labor. He once described himself as much more socialistic in my economic theory than capitalistic, and advocated for a number of progressive policies. I want to quickly go to graphic 4 here, where he gave a speech in October of 1965 before the Illinois AFL-CIO. He said the labor movement was the principal force that transformed misery and despair into hope and progress. Out of its bold struggles, economic and social reform gave birth to unemployment insurance, old age pensions, government relief for the destitute, and above all, new wage levels that meant not mere survival, but a tolerable life. And there are many more examples to choose from. He spoke about class quite often. Again, this is something that I feel has been completely left out of history books intentionally in our public education system. Because if you have a labor force that is aware of how this system works, and if they're aware of what labor power really means, well, maybe it would reverse some of the dismantling that we've seen of labor power and unions in this country. But it is important to know what MLK was really about, and I was happy to hear Seneca talk about that, even though it was on Tucker Carlson's show.